Today, we're diving into a fascinating scientific paper that uncovers a really unexpected twist in the whole climate change story. It connects a major food crop, our water supply, and the very air we breathe in a way you might not see coming. So let's get right into it.
Look, we hear all the time about the downsides of rising carbon dioxide, and for good reason. But what if, just for the plants that feed us, there's a surprising benefit? That's the big question we're unpacking here. Could rising CO2 actually have a secret upside for our global food supply?
All right, so let's lay out the basic problem. We know CO2 in the atmosphere is going up, and we also know that CO2 is basically food for plants. It's essential for photosynthesis. So scientists asked a really critical question. What happens when you try to grow a major crop, something like sorghum, in the high CO2 world of the future? And what happens when you do that, but you also limit its water?
And that question, well, it leads us right into our first section, a climate puzzle. Because, how do you even start to test something like that?
This is the real challenge, right? You can't just sit around and wait 80 years to see what happens. So the question becomes, how on earth do you create a little pocket of the year 2100's atmosphere right here and now just to see how plants will react? It honestly sounds like something out of science fiction.
And that brings us to section 2, farming in the future. Because it turns out the way they solved this puzzle is just incredibly clever.
They basically built a time machine for plants. Seriously. Out in the middle of the Arizona desert, scientists used this amazing technology called Free-Air CO2 Enrichment, or FACE for short, to create a little glimpse of our agricultural future.
So, how does this FACE thing actually work? Well, first, they mark out these big 25-meter circles in a field of sorghum. Then, they surround these circles with rings of pipes that gently puff out CO2. Now, here's the really cool part. A computer system is constantly monitoring stuff like wind speed and direction, and it adjusts the CO2 flow in real time. This keeps the level inside the ring at a steady concentration, simulating the atmosphere we expect in the late 21st century. It literally creates a bubble of the future to grow crops in, right out in a real field.
So with this whole setup running, they created 4 different scenarios. You had sorghum growing in today's CO2 levels with plenty of water, and then that same group but with limited water to fake a drought. And then you had the future groups, plants growing in high CO2 with lots of water and high CO2 under drought conditions. This setup is so important because it lets you perfectly isolate what effect that extra CO2 is really having.
So, the big question, what did they find? Well, that takes us to section 3, the surprising results. And believe me, this is where the story gets really, really interesting.
Okay, before we get to the first number, we got to understand a key term. Evapotranspiration, or just ET. All it is really is a measure of the total amount of water a crop uses. It's the water the plant breathes out from its leaves combined with the water that just evaporates from the soil around it. Think of it as the crop's total water footprint. And here it is, the first big reveal. The sorghum growing inside that high CO2 future bubble, it used 10% less water, even when it had plenty of water available. Turns out, the extra CO2 in the air lets the tiny little pores on the plant's leaves, they're called stomata, close up just a little bit, which means they lose less water to the air. Pretty cool, huh?
Okay, so the plants are saving water. That's great. But for farmers, for our food supply, the much bigger question is about efficiency. Did this water savings actually translate into getting more bang for your buck, or maybe more crop for your drop?
And that brings us to our next big idea. Water use efficiency, or WU. This might be one of my favorite analogies in science. Just think of it like a car's fuel efficiency. It's the plant's miles per gallon, how much grain it can make for every bit of water it drinks up. And just like with your car, a higher number is way, way better.
And this right here is the most stunning result of the entire experiment. For the sorghum plants that were stressed out by drought, growing in that future high CO2 air made their water use efficiency for producing grain shoot up by an incredible 19%. They got dramatically better at turning that scarce water into actual food. This huge jump in efficiency, well, that's the heart of our next section, more crop per drop. This is where we see what these numbers could mean for the real world.
This table just lays it all out so clearly. Take a look at that top row, grain efficiency. That's the part we eat. You see that incredible 19% jump under drought, but also a solid 9% increase even with plenty of water. Now look at the second row, which is the overall plant matter. The efficiency boost was massive pretty much across the board, between 16 and 17%.
So what's the bottom line?
What this all suggests is that in the future, farmers might be able to grow more sorghum using the exact same amount of irrigation water. And maybe even more important, especially for drier parts of the world, it could mean the crop is tougher and more productive when a drought does hit.
But, and this is a big but, that isn't the whole story. To really get the full picture, we need our final section, a final word.
Here's the core conclusion, and this is coming straight from the scientists who ran the study. They say that the water needed for irrigated sorghum will be lower, and that productivity in dry areas will go up. But then they add a very, very important condition.
And there it is, the catch. Provided global warming is minimal. This is so important. The CO2 fertilization effect, it's not some magic bullet that's going to solve everything. These amazing benefits in water efficiency could get completely wiped out if other effects of climate change, like brutal heat waves or even more severe droughts, get out of hand. It's one positive piece in a much, much bigger and more complicated puzzle.
What this research really does is peel back just one layer of the incredibly complex dance between plants and our atmosphere. And it leaves us with a really fascinating final thought. As our planet keeps changing, what other secrets are plants hiding, just waiting for us to discover?